So if you don't mind, I want to go ahead and just kind of jump into it. I don't know if you're on because you are scared of the changes that are coming to the industry, or you're on because you already see and understand that there is significant value long term, and whatever you're here for is absolutely fine. Today, I want to really have an open conversation. So if I say something and you want to know more, or you want to challenge it or push back on what I'm saying, you go ahead and do that. And I want you to know, Paul Wheeler, that when I tell you the things that I think you should be looking at moving forward in terms of opportunities, I understand that I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what all of those things are that we need to look at opportunities. And so I'm just inviting you, if you will, to be open-minded enough to consider the things that I'm saying, because it might very well change the way you think about the situation. And I don't mean you specifically, Paul Wheeler, because you tend to be a very positive person, and I've always known you to see opportunities where other people don't see them. But I also want to let you know that taking some notes might be beneficial. We will try to get a transcript out to you within the next couple of days. You'll also have some resources and some tools that you might want. We don't have a landing page or something for you to go to, so you might just have to post in the chat if you want us to send you some stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the agenda today is really, really simple. First thing we're going to talk about is vacuum cleaners. And I know you might have a hard time understanding how vacuum cleaners might pertain to what's going on, but I'll tell you. Then we're going to talk a little bit about The Strangest Secret. I don't know how many of you are familiar with The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, but it's absolutely amazing. And it's something that gave me a tremendous amount of confidence as I learned to cut my teeth in the direct sales business. We will talk about the three different groups that you can be in. Then we will talk about the skills that you need to develop, or that I think you need to develop, because there's really one skill that all of us need to supercharge, and we can't be afraid of consumers asking us questions, and we'll talk about that. And then we're going to cover some to-do items, meaning here are the 3 or 4 things that if I were you, I would move forward with immediately. So how many of you knew that I grew up in the direct sales business teaching people to sell vacuum cleaners, specifically Electrolux vacuum cleaners? So all the workman coaches do. Most of you others probably do not. But I want you to imagine this. I'm 21 years old. I've been in the landscaping business in Atlanta, Georgia. Just picture me in some green work pants and a yellow shirt that says Care Green across the front of it, because that's what I looked like back then. And I was fortunate enough to get a contract to work for the Electrolux executives. They had just moved their headquarters to Atlanta. And so I got exposure to the direct sales business from the top. And these people made money. They had limousines and fancy parties, and they were way classier than I was. And so they said, hey, Cleve, how about you come to work for us? We'll let you run our office in Indianapolis, Indiana. And Denise Klein, I was excited about moving to Indianapolis, Indiana until I got there. And then when everybody who moved me in there, they left and went back to Atlanta, which is where I'm from. I'm sitting in my apartment at 202 Indiana Avenue, right on the canal development right downtown. And I thought to myself, what on earth have I done? I have moved to Indianapolis, Indiana to teach people to sell something that I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about vacuum cleaners. I don't know anything about how to sell them. I don't know anything about anything. And so I had to figure a way to find my own power. And by the way, Megan, if it's not bad enough, when I moved to Indianapolis, I was in the office my very first morning, and I answered the phone and I said, Electrolux, Cleve, Gaddis. And this voice says, who are you? And I said, well, I'm the branch manager. Who are you? He said, I'm the branch manager. So I had to tell the person I replaced that I had replaced him, and that was not an easy conversation to have. And so I needed to find ways to make sure that I had my head in a really, really good spot. And I decided, look, there's 3 groups in the world, and I decided in advance which group I wanted to be in. There are those who listen intently and act like they're paying attention and refuse to make any changes in their life. And I decided, no, that's not going to work. I've got to reinvent myself. There are those who avoid listening. And for those of you who are familiar with me, you will know that sometimes I am in this group. There are those who avoid listening because they already know the outcome, or they already know everything, or whatever. And that's not a good group to be in. And then there's the group who considers things and listens with an open mind, and really focusing on adapting to the changes and finding that silver lining. And when I moved to Indianapolis, I decided that I wanted to be in that group, even though pretty much I think everybody in the city of Indianapolis was against me. Terry Murphy, I didn't talk to all of them, but they all seemed to be pretty much against me and me being successful in that area. But I decided I wanted to be in the group that had an open mind, that listened, that focused on how do I grow? How do I develop? How do I learn? How do I see opportunities, David Shepard, that other people do not see? How do I look at things differently so that I find the opportunities that other people will not see? And I'm going to open this up here for you real quick and share my screen, and I'm going to make sure and share my sound. I'm just going to play about 1 minute and 30 seconds of this. Let's see here. I don't see the opportunity. Here we go. Share sound. And they moved it around on me. So let me share this. And then let me open this, and I'll pull it over for you guys to see.
We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about. Throughout all history, the great wise men and teachers, philosophers and prophets have disagreed with one another on many different things. It's only on this one point that they are in complete and unanimous agreement. If you only care enough for a result, you will almost certainly attain it. If you wish to be rich, you will be rich. If you wish to be learned, you will be learned. If you wish to be good, you will be good. Only you must then really wish these things, and wish them exclusively, and not wish at the same time 100 other incompatible things just as strongly. The great law, briefly and simply stated, is that if you think in negative terms, you will get negative results. If you think in positive terms, you will achieve positive results. In 3 words, believe and succeed. William Shakespeare put it this way: our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. George Bernard Shaw said, people are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. I don't believe in circumstances. The people who get on in this world are the people who get up and look for the circumstances they want, and if they can't find them, make them. Well, it's pretty apparent, isn't it? And every person who discovered this for a while believed that he was the first one to work it out. We become what we think about. Now,
all right, let me close this window. I have to disclose, for those of you who know me, you know that Ann Daniels has worked closely with me over 18 years. And I get a text message from her saying, make sure to speak to others, not just those on page 1 of the Zoom. So thank you very much, Ann. I will absolutely do that. And I appreciate your feedback, although I will tell you it is difficult to read text messages and run a webinar, but I appreciate your confidence in me. So the strangest secret, I assume those of you who have heard it understand exactly what it means, but those of you who have not heard it, what does it mean to you? Because what he's saying is we become what we think about most of the time. So if we think we're going to be an agent or a team leader who's able to find opportunities in a changing market where other people think it's totally challenging, the reality is that's probably who we are going to become. So Ann Daniels, are you on? Can you unmute?
I'm unmuted. Don't put me on the spot, please.
Everybody say hello to Ann Daniels. She has been a huge part of my professional life for, almost 18 years. And talk about somebody who is not afraid to tell me what to do. That is Ann Daniels. She is always happy to do that, but she's always got my best interest at heart. What does it mean, Ann, that we become what we think about most of the time?
Oh, Lordy, Cleve. I think that if you constantly are thinking that the day is going to be terrible, the day is going to be terrible. But if you constantly think that I'm going to put my best foot forward, I'm going to do the best that I can, and when I lay my head down on the pillow, I'm going to feel good that I have done everything I can to move myself forward, and maybe those around me as well.
100%. Have you ever known me to be in a bad attitude? Be in a bad mood or have a bad attitude?
No.
This is from someone who I'd come in the office and I'd literally open the door and throw a grenade in, and then I'd open another door and throw another grenade in, and open another door and throw another grenade in. And she would come down the hallway and she'd say, "Look, you need to go home. You need to go home." And so the reality is some days when I wake up in the morning, I do not have the most positive outlook. I'm tending to look at things through a negative lens, and that is not helpful for me, because my mind is strong enough already that I can fairly easily, Casey Counsel, convince myself of almost anything. No matter how stupid it is, no matter how nonsensical it is, no matter how far-fetched it is, I can convince myself of those things. But the reality is that when I wake up in a positive mood, or I do something to get myself in a positive mood, then I handle everything differently. So we're going to talk a little bit about the settlement. I think everybody knows it, but we're going to review the settlement. I'll give you a chance to ask any questions that you'd like to ask. I don't have all the answers, but I am convinced that if you have questions, we can get you all of the answers if we don't have them here today. But here's the single most important skill set that all of you need to develop. For those of you who know, Tammy Slay is my sweetheart. For 2.5 years, we spent this weekend together going to Knoxville, Tennessee. And so Tammy and I visited a lot of the way back. You know, it's a very romantic thing to do, to talk about the class action settlements when you're traveling together. And she basically suggested to me, she said, you know, the skill set that we all need, that many of us do not have, is we need the skill set to sell our value on the buyer side of the business that no buyer could imagine buying a home without us. And I see Paul Wheeler shaking his head up and down, and it was immediate. And I think so many of you are out there like, yeah, that's probably true, but I don't know how to do that. And I'm not sure that buyers will be willing to pay me. Okay, fine. I get that. And some of that could be true. But the reality is most of us in the past have not really sold our value on the buyer side of the business. Jeff Ernstall, do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with you.
In many cases, we're just kind of interlopers. They're going to buy a house with or without us, and so we'd like to be included in that process. And so we're sort of an interloper. Let me in, and I'll help you with the transaction, and then we can move forward from there. And I don't think that's the right way we should look at it. So if, and I want you all to think about this, Tracy McNeely, you think about this too. If the first thing you think about when you get ready to show a property is what website or where do I need to go in order to find the information on how I'm going to be compensated, Tom Jones. Now think about this. If that's the first thing you think, then you don't have the right buyer's agency agreement, and you haven't had the right discussions with your buyer. Now, Luke Dyer, I'm not saying that all buyers have the ability to pay you. I'm not saying that at all, because some of them do not, and I understand that. And my guess is that we will work through some of the things we need to do in order to help buyers who do not have the wherewithal. Like, for example, as many of you already know, a VA buyer cannot pay their own agent, period. It's against the rules for a VA loan. And so there's going to be some things that we're going to have to work through. But the reality is this, Jamel, if we focus on building our value, helping the consumer, the buyer, understand the value that we will provide, if we do that up front, and we can get them to be in a position to be willing to compensate us, whatever that looks like, even if it's just they know we've got to go get the compensation from the seller, but they know we need to be paid, then really most of our job will be done. Most of our jobs will be done. Now, let me ask you, anybody who wants to chime in for a second, rate real estate agent skill set on helping buyers understand the exact process they're going to use to represent them and the benefits the buyer will receive. In fact, everybody go to the chat box and just type in on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. 1 means, well, I don't even know that I provide value. So we got a 5 and a 2 and a 6. I love that. We got a 2, a 5. Ooh, Jamel says 9. Those must just be her clients, though, because I'm sure she doesn't think everybody does it. A 3, a 4. Denise Klein says 10. I love people who have confidence. The reality is, Denise, I'm asking you to rate all of the real estate agents in the world. And I will tell you right now, in my opinion, they don't deserve a 10. They don't. In many cases, look at this. All these ratings, as you see them flow by, all of them are way closer to 1 than they are to 10. But when you go on a listing presentation, don't you have to tell the seller exactly what you're going to do in order to earn your X percentage? Don't you have to tell them? And then David Shepard, don't you actually have to do it? Because now you've shown them your cards and they know what you're supposed to do. And now you've got to turn around and do it. Sounds like a lot of pressure. Jamie Finlayson, I don't want to have to do all the stuff I tell people I do. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. The reality is, though, that is how we're going to develop our business. So many of you who know me have probably never met my business partner. And I am very proud to say that my business partner, she and I own a group called Modern Traditions Realty Group right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And we've been managing it together now for the last year and a half. And so, Christy, I don't know if you're willing to unmute, and sorry for putting you on the spot, but say hello to everybody.
Hello.
Everybody give Christy a good wave. Make her feel good. Tell her, hey, Cleve is nice and he's a great business partner. Tell her that. Send her private messages. So Christy and I have had many conversations over the last few days, and those conversations are all about this. And I want you to think about this. This is not the first time I'm going to tell you this. In the normal course of day-to-day business in real estate, when you as an agent or somebody as a team leader or anybody on your team, Sarah Michelle Bliss, when they hear an objection that they can tell is generated by some type of knowledge about the settlements, they're going to look at it as a loss. They're going to look at it as a roadblock. They're going to look at it as a hurdle that they may not be able to overcome. And so what I want to make sure, Tom Pierce, that everybody fully understands is the main thing we need to do as real estate professionals is we need to get out in the field, on the phone, over text messages, doing open houses, whatever it is. We need to do twice as much of that activity as we've ever done in the past. Because what we need to hear, Sarah Bernard, are the objections that consumers give us so that we can figure out ways to, number one, overcome those objections, but number two, Jeff Fernstall, even more importantly, for us to overcome the objections before they even come up. Allison Orsley, I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. I added an S the first time. There's no charge for the extra S. I know it's not there. We are listing a home. Well, I'm listing it with one of my agents. I get an email from the seller. He has the place in the Georgia exclusive listing agreement where it shows who's going to be paid what. And he has so politely, Terry Murphy actually cut that out. And then he has circled in red that he wants my fee to be this amount, which is perfect because it happens to be what we wanted to charge. And the fee that he's going to pay the buyer's agent, he had a very specific amount for that blank as well. And Christy, I don't even know if you know this. I don't know if I told you, but that number was 0. As my second daughter, Kyla, would say, OMG, Dad. OMG, Dad. And when he said that, I'm like, what? And so I prepared for him, Sarah Michelle Bliss, the most amazing email that said, basically, don't be stupid. That's not the way we're going to do it. If you want to work with me, you got to do it our way. And we can't do X, Y, Z. Fortunately, Allison, I did not send that to him. Because when I got finished, I looked at it and I thought, you're kind of a butthole here. You might need to hold off before you send that to him. And instead I said, hey, look, I know there's a lot of changes based on the news out there. And I want you to know that it's uncharted territory, meaning I'm not sure exactly what the right thing to do is or not, but I want to talk about it. And he said, that'd be great. How about we do a phone conversation sometime in the next few days? And I just have to tell everybody, by the way, we're getting up to the limit of our webinar. So another 5 or 10 people come in and nobody else will be able to get in. So for those who miss it, maybe we'll do it again. But when I talked to him the next day, I said, hey, we can't really do all of the listing things that we need to do if we're not offering any cooperation or any form of cooperative payment to a buyer's agent. And that's my stance. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I'm saying that's my stance. I'm not willing to list the home if we're going to decrease the pool of buyers by not offering compensation. And he said, oh, I think you misunderstood what I was saying. And I said, okay, great. Would you explain it to me? And he says, what I meant is that I'm happy to pay you your percentage, but I want to pay a buyer's agent or a buyer broker somewhere between this percentage and this percentage, depending upon the deal we're able to negotiate. Now, I want you to tell me, Jeff Vernstall, how is that any different than what we've been doing for years?
Seems about the same thing.
So he wanted to know that he was only going to have to pay the highest percentage if we got him an offer that was acceptable to him in the first place. And I don't know about you, but that seems very reasonable to me. Jen, would you agree? Jen Gerard, would you agree that that's reasonable? I don't want to sell my home for less and pay the buyer's agent more. Does that make sense? I love this. Rachel says, many agents don't understand how houses work. What a great description, by the way. That's what I teach agents. You're a certified master home inspector and owner, and I love that. And the reality is we've all got to get better at our understanding of everything as we move forward. And so the reality is we have got to, on the buyer side of the business, we've got to embrace when you have an inspector that gives you a list of all the things that are wrong with the house, because that's what the buyer needs most. The buyer needs to, Rebecca, be able to go in eyes wide open with a full understanding of the nature of the home. My third daughter's in the process of buying her house. She's actually using her mother as her agent, which, by the way, I don't blame her at all for that. But she needs to get some advice from her dad. And she says, I'm not going to get a home inspection. And I just politely said, oh, yes, you are going to get a home inspection. And there was 10 or 12 or 15 things that she really, really, really needed to understand. And that home inspection helped her understand that. So the single most important skill, Jeff, that you need to develop in order to be successful as we move forward in the market is you need to be able to clearly explain the services you provide in written form, in graphical form, in PowerPoint presentation form. And you need to be able to clearly articulate the benefit of each. And I want to give you an example. How many of you, when you go on a listing appointment, discuss broker reciprocity? Just go to the chat box and just say yes if you do and no if you don't. If you discuss broker reciprocity. Janice, I see you going in there and typing it right now. Thank you very much. You're a wonderful student. We've got yes, yes, absolutely, yes, yes, yes. No, yes. So Chris Haywild, can you unmute for a second? Chris?
Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good. I don't see you on my screen, but it's very nice to talk to you. So when you talk about broker reciprocity, what do you tell a seller?
Well, it's incentifying a buyer agent.
Right.
And let me back up a little bit. I'm in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I feel like we've been already ahead of the game in some ways because our state forms already go through what the total amount is and how it's broken out. And so it's very easy for us to kind of go through the documents and explain where the money goes because it's already in our documents.
Yep. There's 18 states that have already embraced buyer brokerage, and they represent the numbers in different areas. But I want to stick, if you don't mind, with How do we help a seller understand the benefit to them of us participating in broker reciprocity?
How I've been explaining it
Yes.
is that I bring, if I was the buyer agent, if I had my little buyer agent hat on, and I bring a buyer and I write up an offer, does the work stop there? It doesn't.
Yep.
You're incentivizing a buyer agent to help their client to get to the end so that the seller can get their money. I mean, that's the main thing.
That is so right. Chris, thank you so much for unmuting and talking to me. Let's just pretend you're a seller, and let's just pretend for a moment that you live in Wisconsin. And let's just pretend that Cleve Gaddis came on a listing presentation and talked about broker reciprocity. Broker reciprocity is a written agreement between brokerages that allow one broker to use the listings and the information about that listings as if it is their listing. I want you to think about that, Jen. Broker reciprocity is a broker gives written permission to another broker, normally because they're within an MLS, but not all brokerages offer broker reciprocity. There's a couple big ones in Atlanta that do not. And it allows other agents to include your listing, my listing, on their website, just like it was their listing. So Harry Catcher, when you think about it, there's 55,000 members of the local listing service, and let's just pretend in Atlanta, let's just pretend that all of them participated in broker reciprocity. Then Lee Boyle, that means not only will that consumer's listing be on Zillow and all of the other main sites, and not only will it be on my site, but it also has the potential on being on 55,000 other brokerage and agent websites. So Tom Jones, the benefit of that is that the seller can put his or her head on the pillow at night, understanding that it's not just Cleve Gaddis's website where they're getting the exposure, but potentially it's on up to 55,000 additional websites. And that is very powerful. And I picked that one piece because it's not something that's very exciting. It's not something that we talk about. You can do the same thing with lot boxes. And on the buyer side of the business, we have to really be good at explaining the benefit. So let's say we go back to the person who made the comment on, I'm a home inspector, and many agents don't know a lot about homes. And I'm not going to say it's true or not true, but I'm going to say there are some who really fully understand homes. And when you're talking about the importance of the home inspection, I sell the home inspection as part of the services that I provide, not part of the services the home inspector provides, even though we're going to hire a home inspector to do it. Because I want a home inspector to perform up to a certain standard. I want a buyer to go in eyes wide open when they're buying a home. Meaning I don't want them to learn anything, and listen to this, at closing or after, that they should have learned before. Because the truth is, Maria, they don't really need us to tell them what to do. In fact, Maria, if I were your buyer client and you started telling me what to do, you probably wouldn't like how I reacted to you. Because I might very well tell you, look, I don't need you to make decisions for me. I need you to tell me what I need to know and let me make the decisions for myself. And I imagine that many of you who are on here are in that same category. So I need somebody to give me all the facts that I need to understand. Back in 2013, we created for my team, which back then was called Gaddis Partners. It's before Christy and I created our team. And we created what's called the Sure Home Buying System. And Tom Jones, it's a 71-step process from start to finish that we use to represent a buyer. Most of the steps are purely educational in nature, but we're doing all kinds of research and running numbers and sending them things and showing them. Part of the process is that they go into Google or Yahoo or any of the other online portals, and they type the address of the property in 3 or 4 different ways, because you might find that something has happened at that house that you would prefer not happen in that house. And we started teaching buyers how to do that. And it didn't take very long before one of them found that the home they were in the process of buying had been the location of the single largest drug bust in the state of Georgia. And the reason that the entire house, Jen Gerard, was in such good shape is because when the police came in to get all the drugs out, they had to rip all the wallboard down because that's where they had all the drugs stored. And I don't know about you, Tracy McNeely, but I will bet you that that buyer was awfully glad that they were working with one of my agents and not working with anyone else. Michelle Terry, do you agree with that? They want to know. Buyers just want to know. So let's talk about this. What are the things that we agreed to, or that the National Association of Realtors agreed to on our behalf? What are the changes that the settlement puts in place? Who can tell me? Somebody help me. Come on.
One of them that I have seen is the buyer's agreement. They want us to use the buyer's agreement now, which personally I've been using for decades. So they're making it more important for us to do, and that makes sense. Trying to explain our value through that, and having the list of things that we do for them, like you were discussing.
That's right. That's right. So 2 main changes. Number 1, an offer of cooperative commission or a co-op payment to a buyer broker cannot be offered in the listing service. Mm-hmm. Now, Jeff Clemmer, can it be offered other places? Can you tell somebody what you'd be willing to pay them in another website, maybe your company website? I don't know if you can unmute, Jeff.
Yeah, I've had that discussion with some of my peers on where you might be able to do that and if it makes sense to do it. Because it's one thing for it to be legal and another whether it makes sense to do it.
Well, the reality is that if we don't help people have an understanding of what compensation is being offered, they don't have any way of explaining to a buyer whether or not they might be required to make up the difference. And the reality is, it's not that it's wrong, Rob Leggett, to be paid compensation to represent a buyer. It's right. The reason for the settlement is because sellers believe they were forced into compensating a buyer's agent. Now, if you ask me, were the sellers really compensating the buyer's agent? No. The sellers were selling it at a purchase price that worked for them, and based on that purchase price, they were willing to pay these expenses in order to get the deal done, which means I think for years and years and years, buyers have really been paying the commission anyway, because instead of paying $500,000, maybe they pay $525,000, and then the commissions can be paid. Now, this is just me, and I'm not an economist, but the reality is that the market finds its balance, and it does it all the time. Now, there's all kinds of other little things that are included in the settlement, but they're really, how do people who are not included in the settlement get included? How do MLSs who are not included in the settlement get included? You do have some additional agreements that were made by Remax and Keller Williams and Anywhere and other companies that have settled. And they are saying that we will not direct buyers based on compensation. So the Department of Justice has been sniffing around real estate for years and years. I remember 10, 15 years ago, they had lots of discussions with the National Association of Realtors. And the issue is that they don't want us to steer clients. So Josh Foster, I don't mean steering based on someone's race. I mean steering based on commission. So Lee Boyle, they don't want us showing properties to buyers where the offer is X% if there's just because the offer on another property is less. They don't want us to steer. And so, but the reality is, in some cases, Rebecca, if a buyer cannot afford to pay our fee and the seller is not offering cooperative compensation, we need to be able to have a way to have a reasonable discussion. And Grace Ann, I see you nodding up and down. We need to be able to have a way to have a discussion so that the client can tell us which properties they want to go see. So I want you to think about this for a second, Mike Cope. The government says you shouldn't be determining which properties the client sees based on your potential for financial gain. But what we will do moving forward is we will let the consumer determine what they can and cannot see based on their ability and their specific financial situation. And Kendra, I wish I could tell you that, hey, don't worry, we're going to get it set up so there's ways that buyers can finance the commission and things like that. I don't have any idea how that's going to work out. But I will tell you this, the United States government does not want the homeownership percentage to fall below 65%, period. They want to keep the homeownership percentage up. Why would the U.S. government and really the Canadian government, why would they want to keep homeownership percentages high? Anybody? Well, Harry Catcher's doing his hands like this saying, hey, money, money, but I'm not sure that's it. Because in many cases, the ownership of real estate, the taxes generally go more to the local area and not in any way to the national government. It's because they want stability in society. And if you ever read the research behind the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Federal Housing Administration, you will realize that it is all designed to create stability in a market. Rachel says capitalism, and I'm sure that's true, but what the government wants is for everybody to be calmer and act better because they're homeowners and they live in a very stable area. And that makes sense when you think about that. Megan says the housing industry fuels like 25 to 30% of the GDP. I don't know what the number is, but it is a very, very huge percentage. In fact, Megan, there is a website out there where you can go to your state and you can see the exact economic contribution of a transaction in your state. It was included in some material that we published a couple of years ago. So, Megan, if you need it, just reach out to me and I'll figure out how to get that to you. I love that. High home ownership reflects a healthy economy. It makes sense. Pursue the American dream to own a home. In many cases, the equity a homeowner has in their home is the lion's share of their net worth. And I'm sure you've seen the publications that show renters' net worth between $5,000 and $10,000, and the average homeowner, the last number I saw was like $350,000 in net worth. So it's a big difference. Don't quote me on those numbers because I haven't seen them from the Federal Reserve recently. So the reality is we got to keep the offers of cooperative compensation off the multiple listing service. And we have to get a buyer to sign a buyer brokerage agreement before we start showing them homes. Now, I don't want any of you to think that I'm saying you're never going to show a single home to a single person again without having a full buyer brokerage agreement in place. Because you might have to do a buyer brokerage agreement light. You might have to do a little one-page agreement where you go show them the first home, and then you get to know one another and you figure out how you can work together or if you should work together. And then, Jennifer, they sign the full buyer brokerage agreement later. Who knows how we're going to get there, but eventually we will. So here's the cool opportunities that I believe are created by this settlement. Number one, Robbie McBride, I believe that we will have less competition. So I see everybody sitting in a room and the screen is labeled the Ward Group. I'm hoping in your area, whatever area that is, I'm hoping that you have less competition for the buyer business. Because what could happen would be something very, very interesting. And let's just say, Grace Ann Welch, that the average compensation earned on both sides of a transaction, let's just say that it drops just a little bit because we have to have more transparency. But if I said to you today, Grace Ann, and I don't know if this question is appropriate for you or not, because I'm not sure exactly what you do, but if I said to you, how many buyers do you have to take out in the field and show them properties before you get one person who will buy a house? And the Ward Group says they're in Pensacola. I think that means send them referrals in the Pensacola area. I love that. But Grace Ann, how about you? How many buyers do you have to take out and show homes before you sell one? Grace Ann's like, are you sure you want to call on me? Can you unmute, Grace Ann? She might not even know that I'm talking. Now she does. Now she knows.
No, I gotcha. I'm in New Jersey, and my market is the Jersey Shore. So
Perfect. How many buyers do you have to show homes to before you find one that'll buy a house?
I usually have a pretty good close rate. So maybe out of every 3 buyers I'm showing, I can close on one of them.
Perfect. And so for those agents that actually work online leads, sometimes they have to show homes to 5 different people or 6 different people or 7 different people. And the reality is it could be that as the laws change moving forward and we have to have a buyer brokerage agreement signed by everybody, that might be an additional hurdle that means, well, maybe now you only have to show 2 buyers homes before you find a buyer that will buy, or maybe only 3 buyers homes before you find a buyer that will buy. And I don't care how you slice it. If you're showing homes to 8 or 10 people in order to sell 1 buyer, it doesn't matter what your commission rate is, you're making less than if you only have to show homes to 3 buyers before 1 decides to buy. Does that make sense to everybody? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense to you. And so the fact that it should decrease our decrease our competition should be huge. Terry Murphy just posted the state-by-state economic impact of real estate. Thank you for doing that. If you want to go get that and see what the economic impact of a transaction is in your state, please feel free to do that. So the benefit, buyer brokerage agreements will be required, less competition from other agents because many agents are not going to be able to make the changes necessary in order to be successful moving forward in the business. And think about this, LaTanya Ransom, real conversations about representation will happen naturally. Because you have to have a conversation generally before you get a buyer brokerage agreement signed, the conversation about how representation works and the services you will provide for them and the benefits that they should receive, and hopefully everybody's understanding that the benefit a consumer receives from what you do and what you do are 2 different things. Tracy McNeely, I don't really care. If you put my house, when you sell my house on 500,000 websites, what I care about is this, is that when I put my head on the pillow at night as a home seller, I don't have to worry that all the bases aren't covered, meaning I can go to bed knowing Tracy's got me covered. She's got everything going on that needs to happen. So less showings to buyers to close sales. Learning how to sell your value on the buyer side will significantly better prepare you to have conversations on the seller side. Some of you, in fact, many of you, don't do a lot of business on the seller side. And the reality is, I think it's because the nature of seller or listing business is very different than the nature of buyer business. Some of the big listing brokers, I don't know if any of you have ever noticed this, but typically the more listings they sell, the harder they are to deal with. Josh Foster goes, yeah, I can relate to that. Meaning they're pretty bossy. They're pretty in your face. They know what happens. And it's because on the seller side of the business, the seller doesn't think as highly of you ever during the transaction as they did on the first day they decided to list with you. So Josh Foster, you come to my house, I list with you. I'm like, he is the greatest. This is going to be amazing. By Friday, I'm thinking, I'm not even sure Josh can read because he's not responding to my emails. And I know it sounds comical, but that's really the truth. On the buyer side of the business, especially those buyers that need and crave your services, they continue to be more and more impressed with you as you move through the transaction. So from an emotional standpoint, working on the buyer side of the business can sometimes be more rewarding than working on the seller side of the business. But Josh, as you know, working on the buyer side of the business takes more time. Now, have any of you ever seen the Gallup poll rating where they show the public's perception on the honesty of a real estate agent? Have you ever seen that? Tracy McNeely shaking her head yes. What did it say, Tracy McNeely, about real estate, how the public values real estate agents?
Not very highly. They're right down there with used car salesmen.
Used car salesmen and politicians.
Politicians, yep.
I don't know about you, Sue Hinker, but I don't want to be in a group with used car salesmen or politicians. And if you're on the phone and you sell used cars, I don't mean any disrespect by it, but that's not the place I would go to get the most honesty. But when we, Selena Galinas, have to start getting these buyer brokerage agreements signed and we have to commit to what we're going to do before we do it, and then we have to do it, we might find that the public's perception of us improves. And now for those of you who are team leaders or broker owners who are on today, I invite you to remember one thing, and one thing that I think is very important is that when a consumer trusts your agent more, they will follow that agent's advice more closely. And if you're making a good bit of your revenue through ancillary services like mortgage or title or homeowners insurance or something like that, you will find, Randy Cochran, that your adoption rates will go up significantly over time. Because if I'm working with Megan Johnson and I trust her and she's proven that I should trust her, and she says, hey, maybe you should go get pre-approved with this mortgage company over here, I'm a lot more likely to be able to do that. Now, Ryan Olson, I see you're right there next to Megan. And my guess is in your area, you would love it if you had more usage of the ancillary services that you provide. Am I right? He put his thumb up and he did it really, really fast. So the reality is it might be easier to sell more to the consumers we experience because we're going to have to go through a different way of establishing our value, making sure they understand the benefit before they move forward. Now, I'm not talking about specific commission rates, but I want all of you to pay attention to this. Steve Thompson, I'm not saying you got to charge a certain fee or anything like that. What I'm saying is that if your ability to get paid on a transaction is based on the skill set you bring to the transaction, the list of services you will provide, and your ability to explain the benefit of those services, it could be that the agents who are really, really good and skilled at working with buyers get the opportunity to make more. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. I bought a new townhome last July and got into a bidding war. And Victor Oliver, I was very fortunate that the agent who had the home listed was an agent who had worked for me 8 or 10 years ago in the past. And so that gave me a leg up. And when I made my offer on my townhome, there were 12 other offers. And guess who wound up winning? Me. And the reason, Casey Counsel, that I won is not just because my offer was the best, but it was because I had the closest relationship to the listing broker. And so those of you who over the years have built tremendously powerful, Michelle Terry, I imagine you have some powerful relationships all over your market. And the reality is as we move forward, those relationships will be worth money. And so if somebody said to me, one of your fantastic agents, Michelle Terry, said to me, hey, I think you ought to work with us. And one of the reasons you ought to work with us is because Michelle's been in the business for X number of years and she knows everybody in this area. And if we get into a situation where we're in multiple offers, she's going to agree to make a call for us and see if she can get us to the top of the stack. And Ryan Olson, the reality is that when I was buying my townhome, I actually represented myself because I was too stupid to have somebody else do it who had any good common sense. But the reality is I would pay extra for somebody who can get a home for me in a time and in a market where there's lots of competition. You might see that we have some performance-based fees rolling into this market. So can you imagine Steve Thompson listing a home and saying, if you sell it for more, I get paid more. And if you sell it for less, I get paid less. See, it's going to open up all kinds of opportunities for us to look at the way we charge for our services differently than we've looked at it in the past. How many of you have read news articles, David Lawson, I don't know if you have, that say that home prices are going to drop? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Home prices are going to drop. Come on. I know you guys have heard that. The reality is home prices will only drop when there is too much supply and too little demand.
Yep.
Jay Leclerc says it's BS. Yes. And it really is true. They say home prices are going to drop. They say real estate commissions are going to drop. They don't have any idea what's going to happen.
No.
If we as an industry continue to show our value and to build value and to help people understand the benefit of working with us, it could be that our fees remain stable, or who knows, maybe they might even go up. And the only way you'll see prices in this country start to slide backwards, and certainly if any of you disagree, let me know, but the only way you'll see prices start to slide backwards is if we have too many homes for sale and too few buyers competing for those homes. Period. And who knows what's going to happen? But according to surveys and studies that I've read recently, the United States is anywhere from 2 million to 10 million homes shy of where it needs to be. And let's just say the number is 5 million. That means we have 5 million less housing units than we have households who need them or will need them. That's what drives value. Certainly over the last few years, Allison, we had a lot of extra money flow into the economy through the COVID stimulus and all that stuff, and that contributed to the prices of housing rising too fast. But the reality is the reason they were rising in the first place is because we don't have as many houses to sell as we have buyers who want to buy. Now, I want you to think about that, Denise Klein. You and your folks in Las Vegas, you might be able to provide more value in a much clearer way than you have ever been able to provide before. Now, for those of you who are Workman Success System clients, I want to make sure that you're aware that we have a shift module called the Class Action Advantage. It is module number 14. When you log into Workbench, if you'll click on the shift logo, you'll see a list of the modules. It's the very last one. We are making some modifications to that, but it has a here's what we know sheet. It has sort of a here's the things we think you need to do moving forward sheet. And then most importantly, it has scripting for the buyer side and the seller side based on the settlements. And a lot of this was written before we even knew we had settlements. So what do you do now? Number one, do not get your advice on what's going to happen in the real estate market from anyone who does not already know for sure what is going to happen. And there is nobody in that group anywhere that knows for sure. The reality is, if you're going to listen to what the market is going to look like moving forward, my suggestion is that you talk only to people who are at least equally as successful as you, and Paul Wheeler, maybe even people who are more successful. Because you don't want to talk with your unemployed uncle about what's going to happen in the real estate business. I can assure you the advice you get will not be good. So protect yourself. Those of you who spend a ton of time on social media, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but Tom Pierce, sometimes it appears that real estate agents don't have much to do because they sure do post on social media a lot. And I'm going to be honest with you, about 6 or 8 months ago, I had to get totally off of social media because, Sarah Gouldy, I don't want to hear what somebody who knows nothing about something thinks about something, because it doesn't do me any good. It doesn't help me. I want to hear from people who have done full research and understand exactly what's going on. And I want them to tell me, hey, Jim, here are some opportunities that you might not see otherwise. And I think this is such an important thing. So number one, avoid the negative stuff on social media. Get your information from somebody who is trying to figure out how to make it work. Perfect your list of services and master the explanation of the benefits to each seller and buyer. If you learn to sell vacuum cleaners door to door, meaning you're knocking on a door, having to get in someone's home, demonstrate a cleaner, and convince them to give you $1,000 on a credit card before you enter, you get very good at selling the benefit of having that cleaner, not the features of the vacuum cleaner itself. And it is a whole new way of selling. So not only do you need to have a very specific list of services that you're going to provide, but you also need to be able to clearly articulate the benefit to the consumer. What's in it for me? What most people want to go from is being sad or frustrated or unhappy or worried to being happy and to being confident, to being seeing all the opportunities out there and to feeling like they've got some power. So what we're doing is we're selling the emotional transformation. You can feel this way when you live in your apartment, but when you live in your house, you'll feel like this. You feel this way today in your current home, but when you get into your new home, Denise Klein, you'll feel like this. That's what we're selling. We're selling how the services we provide will make them feel in the end. Paul Wheeler, I know you already embrace this kind of way of talking about things because you love the hero and the guide and all the other things that take place in real estate. And the reality is people are just trying to live easier and happier and more fulfilled lives. And that's the way it is in all cases, all the time. You also need to update your buyer presentation, whether you have it in Keynote or PowerPoint, or maybe you're just doing flyers that you put out on the table and talk about. You need to make sure you're updating your presentation. And then you need to celebrate conversations you have with consumers where you can tell what they're trying to do or get you to do is in some ways driven by the settlement. Meaning when people ask you to do something they have not asked you to do before, and you can tell it is because of the settlement, I don't want you to be frustrated. I want you to embrace it. I want you to engage with it. I want you to fully understand what is causing it to happen. And Jim, when you do that, and Tony, when you do that, you will start to come up with ways to help people understand the value in doing what you feel like they need to do. Rob Maynard says, ask for reviews from your clients on social media. I think that's awesome. And ask them while they're on there, Rob, to say, hey, and by the way, those of you who think the sky is falling in real estate, please hush. I think that would be good. So we've got a few things for you if you want them. And to get it, it's really easy. If you want the little tools, just go to the chat box and type in the word free, but don't do it yet because I want you to know what's going to be offered. And if you think you might want some additional help moving forward, meaning if you think, hey, I'm going to need some help to really craft my messaging and to help people understand the value I bring. I've had several people with it being spearheaded by Tammy saying, hey, you should do some additional training on this as we move forward over the next month to help people realize how to make changes. There might be a very small charge for it, might do it in a big group, but if you have any interest, just let me know. So I'm going to send you action plans for listings and closings on the seller side and the buyer side, because those action plans can be the starting point and the biggest, the backbone, if you will, of the services you provide. So if you want to show somebody what you do, Allison, pull up your action plan, show it out there and hold it out there and show them all the steps that you do. I'll also send you the class action advantage scripts, both for the buyer and the seller. And every single morning, I walk through something that is designed to get my mind in the right place. Paul Wheeler, sometimes when I wake up, I got a bad attitude. I've already talked to you about that. And if you want the free tools, included with that will be an audio recording of the actual conversation that I have with myself every single morning. I'm not saying it's what you need to do, but I am saying it probably would be helpful for you to get your attitude straight, especially over the next 3 or 4. And Paul, I was not talking to you because you've always had a wonderful attitude, sir, but it'd be helpful to get your attitude straight. So if you want the free tools, go to the chat box, type in the word free. If you think you might be interested in whatever it looks like, participating in some additional training that helps you learn how to demonstrate your value, to demonstrate the benefits, I want you to go back to the chat box and I want you to type in the word help. HELP. If it says free, we'll get you the tools and resources. It might be tomorrow. It might be sometime down the next couple of days. I promise you we'll get it to you. And if you put in there that you want help, then we will follow up with you specifically to see what other options we might be able to come up with to help you. I've gone 1 minute longer than I need. And Verl Workman, by the way, says, hey, and it's so true. He says it all the time. If you need a coach, if you don't have coaching right now, and you need a private coach that can hold your hand and help you walk through the next few months or the next year, then you might want to go to workmansuccess.com, sign up for a free consultation. Thanks to all of you who have given so freely of your time today. I hope you got at least 1 or 2 things that you can use to move forward in a much more positive way. You guys take care, and I'll see you all again really soon.